Hello, I'm Jonasz Rewiński and you're watching Break the Fake. They make them, we break them, and tell you everything you need to know. On the map, the Gulf of Finland looks calm and even cozy. A narrow sea corridor surrounded by cities, ports and nature reserves. But one tanker accident is enough to turn this blue strip black. According to a model created by the German research center Helmholtz Center Heron, based on data from the tanker called Peace, I suppose the name could not be more ironic, but more on that later. In the event of an accident in the Gulf of Finland, the consequences could affect about 10,000 residents of coastal areas. This is not just about beaches and fishing. Unique natural areas, protected areas, bird colonies and ecosystems are all at risk and at the mercy of a certain sanction-dodging country whose main hobby is invading others. Who's that Pokemon? Well, take a wild guess. Yes, it's Russia we're talking about here. Now, the tanker Peace is not officially Russian flagged, it sails under the flag of Cameroon. However, according to War and Sanctions website, this vessel is involved in the Shadow Fleet for transporting Russian oil, violating the embargo imposed by the G7 and the European Union, and frequently visits Russian ports for some reason. Fairly obvious, right? Under certain weather conditions. In the event of an accident, the oil slick could quickly spread to the shores of several countries in the Baltic region. Currents and winds in the Gulf of Finland act as a natural conveyor belt, spreading pollution over tens of kilometers. The irony is that oil is transported to make money, but in the event of an accident, the bill for cleanup will have to be paid by someone else entirely, coastal communities and taxpayers in neighboring countries specifically. Greenpeace environmentalists warn that a major accident is only a matter of time. Many tankers in the Shadow Fleet are aging, worn-out vessels, often with opaque ownership structures and without adequate insurance coverage. And in the maritime insurance industry, insurance is not just a formality. It is a guarantee that in the event of a disaster, there will be someone to compensate for the damage. If there is no insurance, or it is only formal in nature, the costs fall on the states whose shores have been affected. Now, the Shadow Fleet emerged as a way to circumvent sanctions and restrictions on trade in Russian oil. However, compromising transparency and safety could result in significantly higher costs. In the event of a large-scale accident, neighboring countries will have to quickly mobilize resources to contain the spill, clean up the coastline, and compensate all the businesses and residents affected. And there is no guarantee of full compensation here. The sea remembers mistakes, and it remembers them for a long time. And if anyone thinks that an old tanker with opaque documents is a trifle, then imagine 100,000 people waking up and seeing black film on the water instead of waves. The economy can operate in the shadows, but an ecological disaster cannot. Russia Today editor-in-chief Margarita Simonyan reacted emotionally to the recently released Epstein files. She was relieved to see that there were no Russian surnames on the list. The suggestion, of course, is that in the sea of decadence that is the collective West, Russia is the lone island of tradition where nobody dares to break the rules of ethics and morality.
Что будет дальше? Маргарита Симонян. Смотрим.
Читаешь эти файлы Эпштейна, и если бы у меня были волосы, они бы встали дыбом. Смотришь список этих фамилий, которые так или иначе были задействованы в этой сетке, и думаешь, слава тебе, Господи, что там нет ни одной фамилии, заканчивающейся на «ин», или заканчивающийся на «ов», что там нет наших.
Right, so the only problem is that the open document files in the Jeffrey Epstein case contain thousands of pages and feature a wide variety of geographical references, including Russia. Moscow is mentioned repeatedly in the documents, and the name of Vladimir Putin appears hundreds of thousands of times in various contexts, which admittedly is not in itself proof of involvement in crimes, but certainly does not fit in with the thesis of a complete absence of Russian involvement. Some documents mention Epstein's possible contacts with Russian officials, including possible meetings with Putin himself. Now, according to some sources, the latter could have been planned for the summer of 2014, but that was cancelled after the crash of Malaysia Airlines flight MH17. By the way, you remember how it happened? It was not an accident. The Russians shot it down. So the atmosphere for a potential meeting, not great anymore. Never was, to be fair. Now, this is not to mention all the theories that Epstein could have been a useful tool for the Kremlin. There is no clear evidence of him being an actual spy, but imagine Moscow passing up on such an opportunity for information gathering when it presented itself. Now, after reacting to Epstein files, Margarita Simonyan did not hold back on the Ukraine issue. She stated that the war in Ukraine, and I quote, "with God's help, is moving towards Russia's inevitable and long-awaited victory." Now, according to her, Ukraine is moving towards hell, and the country can either completely destroy itself or become a satellite of Europe.
Украина движется в ад. А украинская война с Божьей помощью движется к нашей неминуемой, безоговорочной и очень такой ожидаемой нами всеми победе. Здесь у меня нет никаких сомнений. В мире очень мало стран, по пальцам вот одной руки пересчитать, которые могут быть действительно независимыми. Какой восторг, что мы одна из этих стран. Украина либо будет вообще раздербанена, может получиться так, что Украина останется сателлитом Европы, Америка на нее плюнет.
Alright, so Russia being completely independent. Have you ever seen the trade balance with China? Well, China certainly would beg to differ if they heard about this, but there is more, so much more. Now, if we look at actual reality, it becomes clear that hell for Ukraine and quick victory for Russia look completely different. The Kremlin planned to capture Kiev in 3 days, but it has already been 4 years and counting. Ukrainian cities are under devastating attacks. Heating plants have been destroyed, apartment buildings are left without heating in the cold. But these same actions are also destroying the Russian economy. Businesses are suffocating, salaries are not being paid, and the country is experiencing a record economic collapse. Now, despite grandiose statements about Russia's independence, it has never been truly free. Vladimir Putin has been president for over 20 years, and citizens have no real choice in politics or economics. People are getting used to living in the same situation without prospects, without actually thinking of any meaningful future. Instead, there's just constant restrictions and sanctions adapting to life in crisis, and of course constant propaganda. And yeah, we did mention China already, right? So no internal independence for the people and not much of an external one in the foreseeable future. The conclusion is clear. While the Kremlin dreams of a quick victory and predicts inevitable glory, reality shows that this is not the case. Quite the opposite, in fact. Ukraine is withstanding the blows, rebuilding its cities and continuing to fight, while Russia is essentially ravaging its own economy, isolating itself, ruining the future of its citizens, and becoming more and more dependent on Beijing. What Simonyan calls independence is in fact a 20-year-old dictatorship with limited choices and constant decline. The true price of the aggression that the Kremlin has imposed on the world and on itself. But ordinary Russians wouldn't know that. With no YouTube or Telegram access to speak of, how could they? And with this, we conclude this edition of Break the Fake. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.